Anyway, let me give you a brief refresher of what we're doing here. We're doing a 4-part training. We did the first one last month, and the recording is on YouTube. But today is December 9th, and we'll have 2 more modules on January 10th and the 3rd of February. Those are all Monday nights. And let me just give you a preview of what the topics are. Last month, we talked about all the changes that have happened this year and the fact that you will need, if you're an area or division, you'll need a physical location. So we talked a lot about that. We talked about possibly combining your efforts with another area if possible, if you need to for turnout reasons. Now, today, we're going to talk more about how the contest flows and what the structure of it is and what kind of people you need and you know what are the responsibilities of them and what defensive planning you might need to engage in. The third module next month will be all about judging. Okay, and that includes all the procedures that we used to do before the pandemic with bringing paperwork and counting those ballots, moving people into a physical breakout room. So a lot has changed. And then finally, the fourth module will be the actual script of the contest day. So we'll talk about all the communication flow between the top officials, including the sergeant at arms, and how they can run the contest successfully during the actual day. So that's our training process. And most of you already know all this, but I just wanted to run through a lot of reminders here. We decided, it's up to each district. We decided to do both the speech and the evaluation contest, just like last year. Now, clubs, we've been talking about this a couple minutes ago. Clubs can do these contests online. Okay, but areas and divisions must be in person. And that's a rule that comes directly down from Denver. The interesting thing about clubs, like last time, is that if they decide not to hold a contest, they can still send people to the area contest. Um, so it is optional for clubs. It's highly recommended, but it is optional. However, the contest is mandatory for areas and divisions. Now, what does this mean in theory? It means that since it is mandatory for an area, that means you must hold a contest, even if there's only one contestant. Now, that might seem kind of silly or kind of arbitrary, but it allows that contestant to advance to the next level. Because if you didn't have a contest, then they would not be able to advance. What I would recommend is that if you're an area director, and if you are in that situation where there's only one person planning to compete, I would recommend teaming up with another area in your division. And that way you can improve turnout. We'll talk about that in a couple minutes, but having a dual area contest. So, some recommended dates for you. Clubs should ideally get theirs done 2 weeks before their area contest. So, definitely sometime in January or February. In fact, I've seen some clubs do it in December, but that's totally up to them. Areas should do it in February and March, as long as it's 2 weeks before the division. And then division contests should be in March or April, and that should be concluded about 4 weeks before the district contest, which is on May 16 and 17. Now, I say 4 weeks because you really want to give a sufficient amount of time for people to prepare. Okay, so they won the division contest, but you got to prepare for that, that awesome district contest. They need a lot of time. Any questions about that?
Can I add?
Yep.
The first bullet, based on last year, when you go into February, don't drag it till the second or third week. Because you need enough lag period for the winners to practice so that they can go in, confidently get into the area contest. So maximum try to finish it by February first week, because you need some training period, some practice period. That's all. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Ananda. Yeah, good point.
Don't drag it to the second or third week.
Mm-hmm. Now, what I recommend is that you schedule these for 6 or 6:30, typically on a weeknight. However, Saturday morning or Sunday afternoon might also work. And like I mentioned before, at least 2 weeks before your division contest, and make sure that on the calendar, there are no more than 2 area contests on any given day. Because if there are more than 2, you're just making it harder for other areas to recruit people, because all the people in their neighborhood have all been accounted for. They've all been used up, right? So it just makes it harder to find officials for the contest if there's more than one contest going on the same night. Okay. Now, a minute ago, I talked about this. So if you decide to join forces with another area, the way it would work is that, the contestants from the first area can compete first, and then the ballots would be collected and counted for those people. And then the second area contestants would compete. Now, it's up to you, but theoretically, you can have the same judges judge both of those areas. And in this particular case, you would only need one test speaker, because if you have an evaluation contest, you could have the first area, those evaluators listen to it. Well, they're all listening to it. Okay. It's just one test speech. But the evaluators from the first area would go take their notes and then evaluate. And then the second area would do it after that. So it's really a way to save a lot of work, because you would only need one test speaker. You would only need, potentially one panel of judges, and you would only need one Toastmaster. Yes, Michelle's question.
I have a question, and that is, in the evaluation contest, you have the test speaker speaking, and then the first group go into a separate room to work on their evaluation. So what about the second group? Do they stay in the room? Or do they have to go in a room and wait until the other competitors have given their evaluations? It doesn't seem like they should be able to hear the evaluations of the first set.
Well, they shouldn't. And, let's say that there's 2 for one area and 2 for the other. Fortunately, their performance is not very long. It's just 2 to 3 minutes. So it is okay to put them all in the same breakout room, and the sergeant of arms would monitor all of them. The
So
only disadvantage is that the second area contestants would have to wait
longer,
longer in that room. So
right.
it's something that I haven't really thought about it too deeply, but I don't see any problem with them waiting,
Hmm.
because what would happen is, after the first area contestants have spoken, the ballots would be collected for the first area,
Hmm.
and then there would be up to 5 minutes while the judges make their, or, you know,
Selection.
yeah. And, the ballots don't even need to be collected until both areas have finished. So what I'm saying is that the evaluators for the first area compete, and then the ballots are collected. The judges make their decisions and the ballots are collected. But then you could have the second group come up and speak as well.
Hmm.
And then after that, then all the ballots could be counted for
Hmm.
both areas. And that would
Hmm.
save a little bit of time.
That would save a little bit of time. The other option, of course, is to get two test speakers, which a couple of years ago, I mean, I don't think I did it last year, but the year before, I was a test speaker in some contests in on the East Coast, and they did have two areas competing on the same night, and they did have separate test speakers for the two different areas. So that's another option, is to have two test speakers.
Can I add?
Yeah.
Can I add?
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah. You know, no, just sorry. The contestants from both areas will go into the same breakout room, and there will be a sergeant at arms who will give them the allotted time of 5 minutes to write down, and those notes are taken away. Right, the sergeant at arms takes the notes away, and the contestants, they don't have, they cannot write anything after that. And one thing can be done after the area. There's a second. There will be three. Last month we talked about. We recommended three sergeant at arms. The second sergeant at arms will escort each of them from the breakout room to the main room. When that speaker's time is to give the evaluation speech. And another thing I think is, after the area contest, area one evaluators give their speeches, the ballots can be collected but not counted, so that the judge's decisions is final. They can be collected. You can just collect them, not count them. You count them at the end when everything is over. And getting a second test speaker, because last year we got it. See, getting a test speaker is not easy. Not easy.
Right, especially now that you can't have them online. So,
Yeah,
and
that's it.
if they're
Now you need
small,
two test speakers in person. Sorry.
right.
Yeah, go ahead. That's
Well,
it.
if it's only like one or two contestants, then the time lag isn't so bad. But I mean, if you had like five contestants or six contestants or something like that, well, you wouldn't. You'd be more like four contestants would be the most. But that would be a little more. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. And because we can't do it online, it's more difficult. So I agree. Let's go with one test speaker and put everybody in the breakout room, both areas, and have them do their evaluations and hand them in, and then do them one at a time. And hold the ballots. I like that idea too. I think you can have the floor again, Hans.
Are you saying
Okay.
hold the ballot if you're having a double contest? Like the
Well,
ballot,
or you could have the ballot counters in the back and not listen to the other speeches and start calculating the ballots while the second area is giving their speeches.
yeah, I just know that you have to, before you can adjourn one contest and start another, I thought the results had to be declared, not announced necessarily. But I thought you had to conclude that process because then all the stuff that goes with protests and all that, it stops it when the contest is over, it is adjourned. Then you open the second area contest. You see what I'm saying?
That's probably true.
Uh,
I'm not sure about that.
And
But-
this we are having both speech and evaluation on the same day, right?
Yes,
So then that will be a lot of extra work if we have to adjourn the meeting between the two area contests. Because you have to see already there's a morning shift, lunchtime, and maybe an afternoon shift. So already there is between the speech contest, between the speech contest and the evaluation contest, already some time has gone. Now, if you have to adjourn again between when the evaluators do their job, evaluation contest between area 1 and area 2.
well, Ananda, we don't have that problem for the district. It's just the area. And
Oh, okay,
they're dealing
okay.
with smaller amounts of
I'm sorry, I was
numbers.
confused. Oh,
Yeah, so it sounds like the question is whether the results need to be in before the second area can start. And it's something that I'll have to look into, but even if that's true, the first area contestants can be interviewed while the ballots are counted.
Right,
So
Yeah.
correct.
it's not going to take that much time, especially if there's only 2 or 3 contestants, for the chief judge and the counters to go finish that process while they're being interviewed. Because you got to do the interviews anyway.
Right.
Either you wait and you do both areas interviewed together, or by splitting them out, you would give time for the ballots to be counted. And then you could have your results, right,
Hmm.
before moving on. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's something that we're in the process of. We gathered scripts from before the pandemic.
Mm.
Okay, because we're going to have to review those scripts before sending them out to everyone, and recommending that they follow that format, and that will be part of that. So that recommendation will be part of that.
Mm.
We post those scripts on the website.
Yeah. Coolio. Thanks.
Just some reminders about what's new this year and how it affects everyone. Obviously, since they all, area and division level must be in person, got to have a physical facility with seating, tables, and ideally some kind of refreshments. The good news is that district bucks may be available to help. But I will caution that it's typically, no more than, say, $50 or something like that. But just to give you a heads up, I mean, you're going to need a lot of seating, tables, and a physical breakout room for the evaluators. Another big change this year is that the tech host role is reduced compared to last year. They will need to manage a camera or maybe 2 cameras for the benefit of the remote viewers, if there are any. There probably, you can bet there will be, and you will need to prepare for that. But the tech host no longer needs to, spend a lot of time renaming people or monitoring breakout rooms in the Zoom, because, Zoom is not going to be used for that purpose anymore. Finally, the last bullet point mentions the fact that, ballots, timing sheets will need to be printed and brought to the contest, because electronic forms like Google Forms are no longer allowed. And that's by order of TMI in Denver. Any questions on those points?
You can just download the contest packet from TI, right? And it has all the forms, the judging form, the certifications, all that.
Yeah, although I don't know if it's grouped together in a packet.
Well, they call it the contest kit. It used to be hard copy, then it went online where you could download it or buy it from the store. And then they just made, I don't know, they made it free.
Yeah,
Particularly
that's
if
something I
yeah.
guess I just assumed that each piece had its own separate link, but if it's grouped
Yeah.
together, that's great.
I mean, you could just go through the forms at the back of the contest rule book and just download them one by one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
but
definitely something that
I'm gonna go check.
Michelle and Ananda and I are gonna have to look into just to prepare that list of links and everything for everyone. So let's see. Let's move on
Hans,
to
there is a question. You want to take it now?
sure. Oh, you mean in the chat or?
Yeah. In the chat.
Okay. So yeah, and that's a good question because I was about to move on to that because the question is, can a person who competes in one area be a judge in another area? So and unfortunately not, because once you become a contestant, you can no longer serve as an official anywhere, um, even if it's in another district. The only exception is that if you're a speech contestant, you could be an official for an evaluation contest, but you can't serve at another speech contest. And in fact, I'm going to move on to the contestant information here, which will cover some of that.
Hans, I had a question. If I
Sure.
am a speech contestant and I don't win, I don't get to the next level, then can I be a judge at another? I'm already thrown out.
Yes, because at that point, you're no longer a contestant. So anytime that someone has been eliminated or like they didn't get first place, then yeah, they can do whatever they want. The the eligibility requirements have remained the same. So if someone wants to do to be a speech contestant, got to have level 2 or a DTM. Their club must be in good standing. But fortunately for evaluators, they don't need any particular educational requirement. The middle bullet point addresses the point we were talking about a minute ago. You can compete at any club that you belong to, but and you could theoretically win at multiple clubs, right? But you can only go on to one area. So you got to pick, let's say that you actually won a couple different clubs, right? But you got to pick the one area that you're going to advance to. And finally, like we mentioned before, if you're a contestant, you can volunteer at another club. You can serve as a volunteer at another club, but you can't do that beyond the club level, just like we talked about a couple minutes ago. And just a reminder, district officers cannot compete, nor can anyone planning to campaign for next year's elected positions. Now, those of you on the call today who are an area director, the typical expectation here is that you should expect to be the chair for your contest unless you found someone else to do that. Because really, that's the most important person. That's the person who knows the most about the people in their area and who they can recruit from, has all the contact information. So you as a director, um, should expect to take that on unless you find someone. But the point is that once that person has been selected, then they're going to need to go on and find the next people. The most important people to find in order of priority are the chief judge. And I say that because that person needs to go recruit their team as well, including timers and judges. And then you got to find, of course, the Toastmaster, the test speaker, and the SAA. Now, area directors as well, you can serve as some kind of official, like a judge, at one of your clubs. And you're allowed to do that at the division contest as well, if you're asked to. In the past, I've seen division contests where, the judges were all area directors. So that's one way of doing it. Um, certainly an option. But these are the people that you'll need to find. Um, and, starting with that contest chair. But what I recommend the best practice for doing this is that the contest chair create a Google sheet that has all the contact information for all the people that they've found so far. And then they share that. They provide edit privileges to the senior officials, including the Toastmaster, the Sergeant at Arms, and the Chief Judge. Those people will need access to that sheet so that they can make changes to the names and contact information of everyone. And most of you have seen this before. Not going to go into great detail tonight, but it just provides the minimum numbers of people that are required for each level. Some interesting things about the test speaker. You want to make sure that they're actually a member. You can't simply find someone who, maybe they work at your business and you think they're a great speaker or something like that. That's not going to work. They need to be a member, and it needs to be a standard 5 to 7 minute talk. It can't be some alternative format like some kind of comedy or whatever. It's got to be a standard 5 to 7 minute talk. Should also not be anyone who plans to run for office next year. And ideally, it should be someone who has not spoken or made an appearance to any of our clubs recently. Because the contestants, you just want to make sure they are not very familiar with that person, because if they did, they would have kind of an unfair advantage.
But if they gave a totally different speech, would that be a problem?
No, it's no problem. I will say, however, that if you've heard that person before, there's certain characteristics that you're already
Aware of?
like, as an evaluator, you could make a comment about something that you already know about that person. So,
Wow, that means that I've spoken at so many clubs, I probably couldn't be a test speaker anymore.
I mean, no one's going to crack down on it. It's just something
Advisable.
to think about. Um, because we all have certain characteristics. Like we all, no matter how long we've been in the program, like we all, you know, there's some, I don't know, but it's not. It's just a guideline. It's not going to be enforced really. So, um, a few minutes ago, I talked about the fact that the tech host responsibilities, since everything is in person now, it's going to be different. So, why don't we spend a few minutes running through what the flow looks like without the tech host and with the fact that things are going to need to be physical now. You're going to have a physical room and all that kind of stuff. So I'll just spend a few minutes going through this. There's a question here. Yeah, there was a comment in the chat from Winnie saying that, yes, ideally the test speaker should not be known to the contestants or listen to that speech before. So, and the comment from Michelle about, what if it's a different speech? Then yeah, that makes it more acceptable. Um, so if it is a person that you think the contestants have heard before, you just want to make sure it's a totally new speech. Okay, so let's say that you're on the day of the contest. Um, as you know, you've got to have someone that calls it to order, and that's typically the SAA. And then they move on to the contest chair. Um, in the past, we had the tech host kind of introduce themselves and read some of the rules, but really those rules only applied to the Zoom session. And you had to mention a lot of rules about how to use Zoom, and that's really not necessary anymore. So a lot of this is going to be more simple now. Once the chair has been introduced, they can go through the dignitaries and then move on to the Toastmaster. Um, and the Toastmaster, makes their opening remarks, announces the speaking order, and then basically has the chief judge go through their briefing before beginning the actual contest. So, as you know, once each contestant has performed and delivers their, speech or evaluation, then the Toastmaster needs to request 1 minute of silence for the judges to complete their ballots. And after each performance is done, then there needs to be a period of unlimited silence. In the past, some people would say 5 minutes, but it really should be an unlimited amount of time because sometimes there are problems that go beyond 5 minutes. Maybe it's 6 or 7 minutes. So after ballots have been collected, what's new this year is that the ballot counters will actually have to, physically collect the ballots from the judges who will be in that room. I would suggest have them hold it in the air, their slip of paper, and then the ballot counters would collect it from them. That's the way we did it before. So then they would move on with the chief judge to a separate room. You would conduct the interviews of the contestants. And once that process is done, when the winners have been, discovered from that process, the contest chair would have to, the chief judge would inform the chair if there are any disqualifications. You go through the awards. Now, the tech host is controlling the cameras for any remote viewers. So they would be taking photographs. That is one responsibility that remains for the tech host. But that's basically it for the speech contest. And moving on to the evaluation contest, really the big change this year is the fact that, evaluators go to a physical room instead of a breakout room. So there's going to be a big difference this year in Sergeant at Arms responsibilities. As Ananda mentioned a few minutes ago, we recommend 3 Sergeant at Arms. One would be in the room with the evaluators. The second would be positioned in the main room at the door, and the third would be outside waiting to escort the evaluators back to the main room. As before, the Toastmaster is the one who's going to make the opening remarks and announce the contestant speaking order. They would then ask the chief judge to do the briefing as before, and then introduces the test speaker. And as I said before, that person, is going to be a standard length speech of 5 to 7 minutes. So you really need to control the process of staying in touch with that test speaker. And, since they're a member, they're already familiar with the standard 5 to 7 minute format, but you really need to stay on top of that. Because some people think that because it's not at their club, they can talk for 10 or 20 minutes, and that's not true. So just, maintain a good communication with that person. Like I said before, the Sergeant at Arms is the one who monitors the note-taking session of the evaluators. In the past, what would happen is that these evaluators would be monitored on Zoom, and the Sergeant at Arms would ask them to fold their notes in half and put it down. But this time, since they're all in the room together physically, the Sergeant at Arms should actually collect the notes after those 5 minutes are up. Any questions on that? Let's see. So I see a comment from Winnie in the chat suggesting to arrange the judges at the back of the room. That way it would be easier for the ballot counters to collect the ballots. Yeah, that's a good idea, because otherwise the judge would have to raise their hand, and if they're scattered around the room, that might be a little more awkward. Okay. So the next process of the evaluation contest, of course, you're going to have the interviews. And we recommend doing those, while during that breakout room, you do the interviews, and then each contestant would be actually escorted back to the main room. like I mentioned before, that's why you need 3 sergeant at arms, ideally 3, because that way one of them can escort people back and forth. Other than that, there's not any other significant changes to that flow. You have paperwork instead of the electronic forms. You're going to need to, you would ideally ask the chief judge to, once the results are in, you're gonna have to have some kind of communication flow with the Toastmaster to say, okay, here are the results. You could hand the paper to them. Just want to work that out beforehand. Before we would do it electronically, we would do it on text message or WhatsApp, but you're not going to do that anymore. So just
I
something to
think
keep in
there's
mind.
actually a piece of paper that they hand to the contest chair that has the results. There is a
Yeah.
form.
So the question, it's like you would have to do it in a way that doesn't interrupt. Like, let's say that the ballot counting and all that is actually finished before the interviews have finished. So they kind of walk back in. You're gonna have to, pass that piece of paper up without disturbing anyone. You just
I think
don't
that
want to make it look awkward or anything like that. I can't even remember
the chief
how.
judge would walk into the room once that's all done. And when the Toastmaster sees that the chief judge is in the room, then they know to start wrapping it up.
Yeah, and you can just, maybe the chief judge can just walk up to the Toastmaster and hand it to them, or they
Mhm.
can hand it to the sergeant of arms and transfer that way. Um, it's a good question. I forgot how we used to do it, but it needs to be physically handed to them somehow, you know.
Well, usually I don't know about this year, but in the past, the division would announce for the area and the district would announce for you know what I'm saying? In other words, you would invite the highest ranking official. And so for an area contest, sometimes that would be the division director would make the announcement of who the winners are. Does that make
Mm.
sense? But I don't know that and they may decline and let the area director, because it's their contest, make that announcement. I think it
Mhm.
by ear.
I think Kay is correct. Like the area contest, the area director or the contest chair, would announce the result.
Yes, yeah, contest chair could do it as well.
Yeah, it seems like over the last 4 years, we've gotten in the practice of just having the contest chair do it, but you're right. It might be nice for the director to come up.
Mhm.
Um, in fact, we could build something into the script that gives that person a piece, kind of like saying, congratulating everyone and thanking them for coming. Um,
Yeah,
just.
it's also if depending on whether they're going to do medals or not,
Mhm.
one official could announce it and shake their hand, hand them a certificate or whatever, and the other one puts the medal around the neck. Depends on what we do this year to recognize the winners.
Yeah. So it's another thing I'll write down. That's another thing we
And
need
Hans,
to iron out.
I think, we need to
Go
prepare
ahead.
all the certificates as well, the participants' certificate. And
Mhm.
also the trophies or the medal, you have to be ready for the area contest, division contest.
Yes, and also if you're going to give a token gift to the target speaker, the test speaker, you would
Yeah.
want to do that at their interview, right? A certificate of participation, and then the whatever you give them.
Yes, you are correct.
Were we giving any gifts in the past few years? I don't remember people doing that.
Probably
mean-
not because we were all online,
No,
Yeah.
certification, I think we
but
talked.
certificates, we
certifications-
did send it, yeah.
If it was hybrid, then you could.
And
They always have, so I don't know.
as far as the awards and medals, I did hear something a few weeks ago about the fact that if you are going to provide medals, they have to be official. They have to be purchased from TMI.
And they're,
You can't just go to a store and
get them
buy,
made.
custom medals. You can't do that.
And just from my experience, when I was an area director, they are expensive and the mailing is expensive. So if you could combine with another area and order them at the same time, maybe you could save on postage. I'm not 100% sure about that.
But why don't maybe the district could just order all of them at once. I'll have to,
That's what they used to
Yes,
do.
Hans, I think, what I hear from Sally, originally, that she may order for the entire district, okay? So double check with her and see how she prefer to do it, and Linda, thank you.
Mhm.
yeah. There's a question in the chat talking about the sergeant of arms. The reason we recommended 3 is that, one would be with the evaluators, another would be in the main room, and the third would be escorting people back and forth between those 2 rooms. So the one that stays in the main room is the person who kind of like, you need someone at the door to kind of control that door, because people might be entering the facility that either they don't belong here, or they do belong, but they need to be shown a seat. It's just kind of common courtesy to have someone at the door, I think.
Well, it's also in the rule book, you have to have somebody that nobody can enter or leave during an official contest speech. So they
Mhm.
have to wait until the speech is over, then the sergeant at arms lets them in.
Yeah, that's a good point, because those of
Can't
you
serve-
who
yeah.
remember those of you who remember the old days when we had, um the district contest was in person, you can't just walk in whenever you want. So
Right.
um let's move on to, we talked a bit about the interviews already, but I really recommend you spend, whoever the Toastmaster is, once you've appointed that person, they should really spend some time thinking about the questions they want to ask, because I recommend you go beyond just the simple questions of what club do you belong to? How long have you been a Toastmaster? You really want to get personal with them. You really want to um, have some advanced knowledge of those people, including their career and any hobbies that they might have, or any source of inspiration that
And
they have.
there is a form that we have, there's the contestants fill out that has that information.
Mhm.
Yeah, the contestant certification, and then there's their profile, the speaker profile form. And the whoever briefs those contestants needs to pass that form along to the Toastmaster, right? At least that's what I remember.
Yeah, it's something that ideally, you're gonna have to be completed in advance,
Mhm.
along with, of course, the eligibility form.
Yeah, and that also can be requested of the secret target speaker, test speaker. So that when they interview that person, it sounds a little bit more personable.
Yeah. So speaking of those forms, that contestant profile and the eligibility forms and the judge eligibility, these can stay electronic if you want. And in fact, that just makes it easier, because you would simply email those as a PDF to the contestant, to the test speaker and to the judges saying, please confirm your eligibility. I need a copy of this as a PDF. And then you'd have that all done. You don't need to print those out. But everything else, like the certificates, participation certificates, the ballots, the timer worksheet, all of that needs to be printed out and brought to the contest.
And could you tell me whose responsibility is it to bring that? Is it the chair, contest chair?
The paperwork?
Yes.
Yes.
So it would be the chief judge's responsibility to bring his or her paperwork. Of course, the ballots, the ballot worksheet, the timing worksheet. So he's bringing most of it. The contest chair should be taking care of the medals and their certificates and the eligibility forms.
And
But
the
you can,
profile for the Toastmaster of the day, the profile.
yeah, or they can delegate that to the Toastmaster. Either one.
Okay, thank you.
So, one point about concluding any type of contest, you're going to have a period of time during the end of the contest where a lot of people need to be thanked for their participation. You're going to give out those certificates. But you want to make sure you don't name or point out any of the judges. I mean, it goes without saying, but you can publicly thank all the other officials and volunteers except for the judges. Now, during the third portion of our training, which is next month, we're going to go into the entire judging process, which includes things like possible protests and disqualifications. So, for example, if there was a disqualification because of time, then the chief judge would need to tell the contest chair. And then you basically, as you know, once those awards are announced, of course, you put them in reverse order. So third place comes first, followed by second and first. Now, there's a bullet point here about the tech host, and that is something they can do. They can take photographs. But like I mentioned before, the tech host is really a much smaller role than they did in the past, because they don't need to control a huge Zoom meeting room like they did before. There will be a remote audience, but it'll be a lot easier to manage, and they won't need to manage any breakout rooms. So really that concludes kind of the differences and changes versus last year. But I want to pause a moment and talk about defensive planning, because given that there are a lot of bits and pieces of any contest and a lot of people involved, you really got to focus on the fact that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And that's why, for example, we recommend backups for each role. For example, if you're at an area contest and you know that there are a minimum of 5 judges required, I'd really recommend you shoot for 7 or even 8. And for example, 3 timers instead of 2. And maybe even a backup test speaker. Why? Because if you don't personally know that test speaker, if you don't have a good personal relationship with that person, you have no guarantee that they're actually going to show up. I mean, you could have spoken to them the night before, but that's not 100% guarantee. So I'd really recommend you have a backup if possible. So I've been talking a lot. Any additional questions that you guys can think of?
Ananda here.
Yes.
Last month, November 15th, we covered how two areas can combine forces. And we also covered to some extent that you need a physical place. It can be any, you need a real room, not an electronic room. So any of the guests have any questions about that? We covered it last month also, but we can talk a little bit. A physical room, because you need a physical room. You cannot do it from your home anymore. Any guests have any questions on that? How to get a physical room so that everybody can, where you can get it cheaply or free or with a little cost.
Yeah, because if you guys, that's a good point, because if any of you that are attending tonight, if you missed the first session that we had last month, a lot of audience members had some suggestions about how to find a facility, like what kind of establishments you could contact, including libraries, senior centers, churches. So there are a lot of good suggestions. Yes, yes.
Corporate clubs too, because oftentimes they have rooms that are large. I mean, some of them have huge, like auditoriums.
Yeah, and in fact, I remember before the pandemic, there was a company, AT&T in San Ramon. AT&T, I don't know if they're still there, but they used to allow other areas to hold, because they had a personal contact there. They had a couple clubs that met in that building, and they actually allowed area contests to happen there. And there's also a club up in Walnut Creek that, they meet in a church, and they've allowed other areas to, to book it. So yeah, we had a lot of ideas that were shared. I really recommend that you watch that recording. What I did for each recording, including the one that I saved tonight, is it includes a table of contents, which allows you to skip forward in the video to exactly the topic that you're interested in. So, obviously a recording like this is an hour long, and it's, that's pretty long. I wouldn't expect you to watch the whole thing, but the recording that we made last month is split out by topic. So all you have to do is click that particular topic in the description under the video, and it'll jump to that topic.
Wow, Hans, I want to know how to do that.
Oh, it's just in the description field under the video. When you go into YouTube, you scroll a bit under the video, and you can see that.
I see.
Now,
that's good.
I'm trying to move. Oh, let me show you this. Ananda talked about the dual area contests, and so, like we said before, if you're in a position as an area director where you've only got one or two contestants, and you might think, oh my gosh, that's a bummer. I don't even want to waste my time doing this. But the reality is that each area is required to hold a speech contest. even if there's only one contestant. Now, if you have no evaluation contestants, then theoretically, yes, you could skip the evaluation contest, but you must have a speech contest. And what you could do to combine forces with another area is that we have a special script for a dual area contest where you're basically allowing the first area to perform first, then they are judged, and then the second area speaks. So yeah, we talked about this about a half hour ago. Are there any questions about how this could be done? I believe in the past we've even had 3 areas combined. I've seen that once. It kind of gets a little awkward, but it is possible.
Depending on how many contestants, the judges can get pretty, stretched.
Yeah.
If they did a 3-way like that.
So Winnie has a question in the chat about getting the list of the number of officials that are required. Why don't I just put that back up on the screen? It's right here.
Yes, that's the one.
Take a screenshot.
Okay.
Winnie, there will be some updates on this, like the area sergeant at arms. You need 3. You need 3. Area and up. You need 3.
Yeah. Now, when you're looking at this chart, you notice that there's some footnotes on some of these numbers. Like, for example, if you look at the club column, you notice that there is a footnote for the timers and ballot counters. It says that a club contest should have 2 timers and 2 ballot counters, but there's a footnote saying you don't need to do that if it's impractical. And what they're saying there is that, we don't, as district officers, we cannot monitor every single club. So we're just saying, here's a guideline, but if it's impractical for you to find 2 timers and 2 ballot counters, then, you could theoretically get by with only 1. This is just a guideline. But for the area, division, and district levels, all of those numbers are required. So just a note for those of you who are area directors, it's recommended. I think it's a great idea that you attend each of your club's contests, but you're not required to. And you're certainly not required to monitor or enforce any of these policies for each of your clubs. But it is a good idea that I think it'd be nice if you attended those contests. But as district officers, we're not required to enforce exactly how the club, conducts their contest. Any other questions on this? Any questions on how to manage a remote audience? Like, for example, and just as a reminder, everyone listed on this page must appear in person. So the only people who can be remote are audience members. Every official and every contestant must be in person. But you might have a remote audience. It could consist of friends and family members. So you would have to have the technical host set up a camera facing the contestant. And it could be as simple as a camera phone, but that needs to be broadcasting to Zoom to the remote audience. Any questions on that?
Well, I would make the point that they would probably need a location that has Wi-Fi.
There you go. Because you don't want to rely on what's it called?
Data, a cell phone reception,
Hotspot.
Hotspots. Mhm.
hotspots, that's it.
Because those are less, they're just less reliable. So definitely, if it's your first time using that facility, if you're not really familiar with it, I would recommend going there a few days in advance. Just make sure that the Wi-Fi is pretty stable, and get in good contact with the manager of that location, to see if there's any problems or any maintenance coming up. Sometimes what I've seen in the past is, let's say that you find a church to hold your contest in. Well, most churches have a calendar of events, and the people who have that room booked before you or after you, they might start walking in saying, "Hey, what's going on? I thought I could just come a few minutes before." And you just really want to be prepared. Like, there might be, say, a youth basketball game that's scheduled at that location, and they might show up kind of making noise, playing a bunch of music or whatever. So just make sure what's going on, make sure what other events have been scheduled.
Sorry.
Hans, I had a question.
Yep.
In this slide, just saw something. I just saw it. Column 2 under club for contest chair. For contest chair, that sign is there. That, what do you call that? That unless impractical for contest chair, for tie-breaking judge, for contest chief judge. Where are they applicable? If the clubs are not having a contest, they are just promoting somebody to go to the higher level.
Well,
Club and
right.
contest,
If
they
they
need a chair, right? If they're having a
well, what they're saying is that
see, if they don't have a contest, they can promote somebody, right? They can
oh
nominate.
yeah, correct.
I think, Ananda, what they're saying here is that you don't really need a contest chair. Maybe the president can organize the stuff, or the VPE, and you do need a Toastmaster. You do need a sergeant at arms. You do need your judges, but
Same goes for tie-breaking judge and chief judge.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
They
obviously
both-
we recommend that they do it by the book, but theoretically they could just have some judges, and then they could hand their ballots to, you could have like one person be the combination ballot counter
ballot counter.
judge,
And
and they could
I've
just
I
collect
think
them and
you
count them
have to have a chief judge, I believe, in case
well,
there's
it says,
contest. Or contest chair could be one and the same, you're saying?
yeah, it's saying there that the chief judge is like that in less impractical. So it's like
Yeah,
they're not necessarily requiring it. So what I'm saying is that theoretically,
yeah.
if you just didn't have many people, you could ask one person to be the ballot counter and chief judge together.
And I've seen cases where a club had a contest and they would have the members vote on who won.
Wow.
So they didn't even have, no, I've seen that. Yeah. And they didn't even have judges. They just, and I think that's not unusual for, so, because it's a lot of work to get judges in. I think Heart to Heart was one of the more unusual clubs that would actually do all the work of getting the 7 judges. And
Well, but would they would still submit the votes secretly, right?
yes, they would submit the vote secretly to the ballot counter, and then the ballot counter would count it up.
Yeah, that's
It's still required that they do it the right way. If there's some club that doesn't do it, then I would suppose the next level up contest chair could declare the contest has to be redone.
Well, I don't see why they would do that, since the club has the right to just voluntarily decide what
Somebody.
people.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
So I don't see that as
well,
a problem.
yeah, it's a tough
call, but
it's
you
kind
want
of a
to
strange situation, because the rule book does say that if a club decides to have a contest, it needs to be run
according to the book.
rule book. But then here in this chart, it's saying that they don't necessarily need a contest chair or a chief judge. It's kind of strange. It's kind of mixed messages there.
Or even voting judges.
Well, yeah.
That's what I'm just saying that I've known.
Well, you
clubs.
definitely need some kind of judges, whether they're the members of that club or
Right, exactly. Yes.
I, you know. But the reality of the situation is an area director might never hear from a club until the last minute, and then that club suddenly says, hey, here's my winner. I'm not going to tell you how we selected that winner, but here he is. And there's not much you can do about it.
Right.
Clubs don't even have to have a contest. They can just nominate somebody.
Right.
That's right.
But we're just saying
It's ideal that they do it according to the book, because that enables you to step up into higher leadership roles and do it at a higher level, because you have experience.
Yeah. I think we should have that practice in our district, because then they're of more help as they go to other contests. And the contestant actually it would be nice if they could have a real contest so they can practice.
Absolutely.
5 minutes and all that stuff.
It provides a motivational factor for them to run meetings correctly. And that's part of what being a Toastmaster is to run things according to a certain format. And this is no exception.
Yeah.
Now, like I mentioned, the next training session is going to be, there's a lot of technical details related to judging and how you recruit judges and what, how they're eligible and all that stuff. So a lot of this is going to be covered at that time. But the technical details of counting ballots, etc. But are there any other questions that you guys can think of about the number of officials that you're going to need to find? And again, the contest chair and the chief judge are the ones who are going to have to do the recruiting and find people. So,
but also keep in mind that if you go and volunteer for other areas, they're more likely to provide you with help too. And that's what I did when I was an area director, was that I did volunteer. In fact, I knew a lot of area directors who volunteered to either be a judge or a contest, not a contest chair, but a judge or a chief judge or something. And that made a difference. That's how we all help each other.
Yeah, I think probably the division director should create a communication across all the areas in their vision saying, okay, here are the dates that are coming up. We've already decided the dates for our contest, and we want to give you advance warning so that if you'd like to volunteer, we would certainly appreciate it. Here are the dates. And, kind of foster that sharing between areas, because it can be hard to find volunteers, especially if a particular area, like the areas that are way up north near a town like Eureka. I mean, some of those people might have to drive an hour to get anywhere, which makes it a little more difficult. But like Kate mentioned, if one area scratches the back of another area, they'd be definitely more willing to help out. So,
Especially if they're highly competitive, they can vote the worst speaker in, and then when it's time for the division contest, their guy wins. I'm just kidding. No, but it's the honor system. Everybody's ethical in our district. I'm positive.
Well, you have to sign some document as a
Yeah.
judge that says
Yeah.
that you're
I
gonna
know.
play by the rules.
Yes. Yes, integrity is everything in these kinds